Good morning, everyone. Try it again. This is Isaiah. Sorry, he's sleeping, you all. He's almost 2 years old. He'll be 2 in September. Sorry, buddy. We started our journey with FamilieSCN2A last year. In June of last year, it had become prevalent that the startling mechanisms that he was doing that I initially thought maybe was like an exaggerated moral response became prevalent that something else was wrong. So when I took him to the hospital, it wasn't an easy fight to get them to listen to me to do an EEG on him. When they did a first EEG last June, they came back and said he was having hundreds of myoclonic seizures a day. At the time, we didn't know SCN2A was a thing. So they sent us home on a medication, and for the next 6 weeks, he did nothing but scream and cry, and it was not working. The day after I came home, I counted 275 seizures, and I questioned what I was doing wrong. So 6 weeks later, in July of last year, we ended up back in the hospital where the genetics report had come back at that time and confirmed the SCN2A diagnosis. I had no idea what that meant, obviously, right? So I remember being on the virtual call with our neurologist and asking her to repeat what SCN2A means and what is, what are those letters, And she could only tell me that my son would experience epilepsy and be delayed. And so I left that call obviously feeling very confused, alone, and not knowing what to do for my child. When this journey first started, he was only having myoclonic seizures, hundreds of them a day. But over the last year, it has progressed to tonic seizures where he stopped breathing for 2 to 3 minutes at a time. That agonizing feeling of waiting for your child to breathe again is nothing that no one should ever have to experience. When I was pregnant with Isaiah, there was no complications known. So obviously when this all began, it was very unexpected. And up until about 6 months old, he was developing fine, slow but steady. And all of a sudden he stopped. He no longer smiled. He no longer made eye contact. All he did was sleep. We went through several hospitalizations over the last year. The most recent being at the end of April, we ended up in status. We had spent 2 days in triage rooms. They finally got an EEG on him, and when they said he was in status, they didn't know what else to do besides intubate him and start a procedure. Watching your child lay in a medical-induced coma for 5 days is really hard. Not knowing at the time if he was septic because we had positive blood cultures at the same time. Thankfully, those became, prevalent that those were a false positive, and he was extubated 5 days later. For the first time in 8 months, I got eye contact from my child. I can't tell you what that means when you feel like your child's not even there for months and nothing you do is working. He finally made eye contact with lots of hope. We spent a month in the hospital. When we came home, we brought a very different child home, one who was present again, but one that obviously still faced many difficulties. Isaiah does not walk, he does not talk, he does not sit up. Often I hear he looks so normal. What could be wrong with your child? And for a long time I thought the same thing. Hi, buddy, are you waking up? Oh, you want to say hi? For a long time I thought the same thing. It's very hard to accept something like an SCN2A diagnosis, but this foundation has truly provided a tremendous amount of support for us. When we spent that month-long hospitalization, I was able to reach out to Leah, who greatly helped me through that time, which is the hardest time of my life. I didn't know if my son was going to make it or not. But today, as I've said, we're present and we're making eye contact. But Isaiah takes 5 AEDs, and a lot of the times he sleeps. I just pray that with our continued efforts, that our children can have treatments that are good for them, that do improve the quality of their life. I just want my child and every child with SCN2A to be okay. So, sorry you all. I didn't come up here with a plan. I don't even think I looked at the PowerPoint at all. So, are you awake up? So, and all to say that this journey is not easy, as we all know. And I pray that one day we all achieve a better quality of life for our children.
Good morning. I am so honored to be here with all of you today and to talk about cortical visual impairment. I've known Leah and Brant and Ben for such a long time, and they're a huge part of my heart. And I'm hoping that I can offer some guidance for you guys as well today too. All right. Go to the next slide when you're ready. So ocular visual impairments, there's a difference between ocular visual impairments and cortical visual impairment. Ocular visual impairments are caused by abnormalities or dysfunctions in the structure of the eye. Cortical visual impairment, however, is caused by neurological trauma or damage. Dr. Christine Roman-Lancy states CVI differs from ocular forms of visual impairment in that the interference in visual function exists not in the structure of the eye or the optic nerve, but in the visual processing centers and visual pathways of the brain. Ocular and cortical visual impairment can happen in isolation or they can happen together. CVI is diagnosed by a medical professional, typically an ophthalmologist or a neuro-ophthalmologist. And wouldn't it be awesome to see a larger pool of neurologists starting to diagnose CVI? But getting a medical diagnosis is important, but having a quality assessment with specific recommendations is equally, if not more important. And those assessments are completed educationally and functionally by a teacher of the visually impaired. CVI assessments and ocular visual impairments are very different. And there are several protocols and inventory checklists for CVI, but what I want to talk to you today is really based on the work by Dr. Christine Roman-Lancy. Her approach is the most comprehensive guide for assessment and interventions for children ages 9 months to 18 years. All right. You can skip 2 slides. CVI is the most common cause of visual impairment for children in developed countries. It can be congenital or it can be acquired. And the wonderful thing that we know about CVI is that it can improve. When we when we meet our kids exactly where they are and provide the information that their brain can understand, they can begin to start using their vision differently, and we're going to see improvements in the way that happens. These are some causes, some of the most common causes of CVI in our children, but it's not an exhaustive list. All right, next slide, please. So Dr. Roman has identified 10 characteristics or visual behaviors that are unique to CVI. The CVI functional assessment addresses each of these characteristics. And as you can see, complexity is one of the characteristics, is divided into 4 subdomains. Okay, next slide, please. The CVI assessment measures the degree of impact on a 0 to 10 continuum, where 10 represents near typical visual function, where 0 equals limited visual function and 10 equals near typical visual function. Scores obtained from the CVI assessment fall into 3 broad categories or phases. Each category has an overarching goal, which then drives interventions. In phase 1, the lower end of the continuum, interventions focus on creating opportunities that build consistent visual responses. We want to get our kiddos looking at things. In phase 2, we focus those interventions on incorporating vision with functional activities and experiences. And so for those of us who have kids with CVI, we know that they don't always look, right? We want them to look at things. We want them to look at things while we're doing the activity, but it doesn't always happen. And so in phase 2, we're really focusing on setting up the environment so that these opportunities can happen. And then in phase 3, we focus our interventions on building the skills required to interpret visual information across settings, activities, and experiences. Early on in Dr. Roman's work, she would say, you know, our kids, their vision changes minute to minute, hour to hour, day to day. But what we know is that's not entirely an accurate statement. It's not that our kids' vision changes, it's that we've changed the environment so that they can no longer now interpret the information that we're giving them. All right, yeah, next slide, please. Perfect, that's perfect. Ordering lunch. So I'm gonna bring up the lunch menu and I would like you to quickly write down your order. So we don't have a lot of time, so I'll need you to do that rather quickly. All right, now head to the next slide. There we are. Here's our lunch menu. Everybody can see that okay? Right, we can see it. There's no problem with our eyes seeing that information. Yeah, we don't have, so if we're having trouble with seeing this, let me make a few accommodations for you to help out. Next slide. There we go. I've added some color for you. We all know that color makes everything better. It really makes those symbols pop out at us. All right, and then we can add color highlighting. We're so far ahead. We can add color highlighting to those lunch menus. We can make the words bigger. We can make more space between the lines. We can do all of those visual accommodations that we do for ocular visually impaired kids, but that's not what we need to do for our kids with visual impairment. All right, so now we see the screen with hot dog, right? And so if you were, it's all good. If we were looking at the lunch menu and the only thing on that menu that we saw that we could understand was hot dog, we would order a hot dog every day, right? We don't want to take a chance with something that we don't know. But if I ordered a hot dog every day and I didn't eat that hot dog, what would people start to say about me? I'm difficult, I'm refusing to eat, but that's not the case. And then we saw at the end, the full lunch menu, where we could interpret every piece of information that was on that lunch menu, and then we can make an informed decision about what we want to make. It is our job to present materials to our kids in a way that creates meaning. And this is true for 3-dimensional objects and 2-dimensional targets. And when we think about 2-dimensional, we're thinking about pictures and words and letters, and photographs. And I mentioned earlier that we must meet our children exactly where they are. We can't scaffold information. We can't say, oh, they're looking at this red pom-pom, so now I'm going to show them a picture. That's not meeting them where they are. So scaffolding materials just beyond where they are doesn't motivate our kids to work harder, but it does limit or extinguish their ability to gain information using their vision. Perfect. Salient features. Dr. Roman states, salient features are the defining elements that distinguish one target from another. They are the key pieces of distinct information that facilitate recognition of an image, object, environment, or person. A salient feature tells us what something is. Our vision, we use our vision and our brain to interpret the information that's being seen. And for our kids with CVI, we have to help them interpret that information. Building the concepts of salient feature is important for all students with CVI, regardless of where they are on the range. For our children with scores lower on the lower part of the range, we begin with the basics. We might say, here's the red pom-pom you liked so much. It has shiny, smooth strands. And for our children with higher scores on the CVI range, we may say, this is the letter D. It looks similar to the letter B because they both have a tall line and a curved line. But the letter D has a curve on the left side and the letter B has a curve on the right side. So we're beginning to build the salient features of two-dimensional material. All right, next slide. So when I say rooster, what images pop into your head? If you're like me, you're kind of shuffling through the images stored in your brain and you're pulling images from past experiences. Even if I show you a picture that doesn't match the image you have in your brain, you're going to be able to pull out the pieces of an image that match what you have in your brain. And those are the salient features. All right, so let's go ahead and skip. Yep, thank you. So there's a mess. There's a mess of images there, but you already have a rooster in your brain, right? So you can hopefully look at this image and find the pieces that meet your knowledge of what a rooster is. Let's go ahead and skip to the next slide, and there's our rooster. To help our children improve their functional vision, we must make sure that the images and experiences we provide create meaning. My mom used to say, garbage in equals garbage out. And while she wasn't really speaking to vision, the sentiment holds true. We cannot connect meaning to an image that we don't understand. And I read recently that when our brain cannot interpret the information being presented, it perceives the information as stress. And we all know that a stressful student, a stressful child, is not educationally available for instruction. All right, now let's think about butterfly, and we'll do that same thing. Put that picture of a butterfly in your head, and then we'll skip to the next picture and look for that butterfly. Next slide, please. We'll get there eventually on this slide. I'm going to keep going. There it is, right? So we found the salient features that made that butterfly a butterfly. So for takeaways, next slide, please. For takeaways, our job is to build visual capacity in our children. For our children with CVI, using their vision is hard work. Our children with CVI use their vision differently in novel and complex environments. And so they may look at that red shiny pom-pom at home, but they might find that they're not, but you might find they're not looking at that same thing in a restaurant. We need to support our children with CVI exactly where they are. And a CVI assessment is different from an ocular assessment. For resources, Dr. Roman Lancy just updated her website, and that's at cviresources.com. Connections Beyond Sight and Sound, University of Maryland is where I work, and we have some webinars and resources there. Perkins School for the Blind has amazing resources on CVI, CVI Scotland, and past illiteracy. There are references and then my contact information. And that's all. Thank you so much.
I'll jump right in. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Anna DeStefano. I'm a board certified behavior analyst, or BCBA, and I'm here to talk about applied behavior analysis, commonly known as ABA therapy. I own and run a ABA therapy practice in Los Angeles. I absolutely love what I do. I love working with kids, and I'm really excited to be here today because a big part of my practice has been working with the kiddo with SCN2A for just over 3 years now. So my goal for today is that I can provide some insight into what ABA is and explain how and why it can be a beneficial resource for your kids specifically with SCN2A. All right. Well, it's not going to be as much fun if the slides don't come up, but that's okay. So the way that I explain ABA therapy to parents is that ABA is a comprehensive skill building therapy. So what that means is that ABA can help your child learn any of the necessary skills to functionally and appropriately participate in their environment. So it's as simple as that. ABA therapy can help your child learn any of the skills that they need to learn. So what does that mean and what does that look like specifically for a child with SCN2A? There are two really impactful skills that our kids with SCN2A need to learn. Well, okay. Those two skills are joint attention and motor control. So these two skills are vital for supporting a child and being able to functionally and appropriately participate in their environment. And they are also the skills that often generalize into other areas of learning, which makes skill building exponentially easier over time. So the first impactful skill we're going to talk about is joint attention. Joint attention, or shared attention as it's called, simply means that two or more people are focusing their attention on each other or on an object. So I did have a picture of the Little Mermaid when Scuttle was holding up a fork and Ariel and Flounder were both looking at the fork to show an example of what joint attention is. Right now, all of you are looking at me and we're all engaged in the same conversation. So that's what joint attention is. The next impactful skill is going to be motor skills. So with motor skills, we have motor planning and motor control. So motor planning is that split-second signal that your brain sends your body to do something, and motor control is actually being able to do it. I had a photo of Arthur and the sword and the stone. So Arthur's motor plan when he's up to the rock, right, picking out the sword and the stone, is to reach out and touch the sword with his hand. His motor control is going to be able to actually squeeze the sword and then pull it out of the rock. So being able to intentionally focus our attention and move our body to manipulate the world around us, that is how babies and most people learn how to functionally interact with their environment. So while on the surface, these skills might seem very easy or simple, they require a very, very complex brain and body connection that usually our kids with SCN2A or other profound needs cannot access. So that means that our kids have to learn every single step of every single skill totally from scratch. This is why I love ABA therapy for our kids with SCN2A. So ABA therapy is a conducive therapy approach to skill building totally from the ground up. We'll get there like halfway through. Okay. So ABA, the therapy approach uses three really important therapy approaches. We have rote learning, positive reinforcement, and integrating other therapies. So rote learning refers to a repetitive, systematic approach where we break up the task into the smallest skills possible and then teach those skills step by step. Since kids with SCN2A cannot easily access their brain-body connections, this is going to be a very, very effective learning tool. Positive reinforcement is also amazing for our kids with SCN2A. It encourages our kids to participate in participate and be motivated in tasks that they otherwise wouldn't be motivated in. So positive reinforcement is one of my favorite parts of ABA therapy. It basically takes something that It basically takes something that a person loves and it pairs it with something a person doesn't love or is not interested in, and then motivates them to participate in the task. So over time, that person takes that thing that they love and they naturally grow motivation for that thing that they didn't love, and exponential skill building can occur from there. Yeah, keep going. Keep going. Keep going. Oh, Arthur, there he goes. Okay, stop. Perfect. Here we are. So the last reason that ABA is a great therapy choice for our kids with SCN2A is because it can easily integrate and carry forward other therapies that your kids are receiving. So like PT, OT, and speech, we can integrate that into ABA and make a really comprehensive plan for your kids. Okay, next slide, please. All right, we're back. So in our first example, you saw it for a second, Scuttle and Ariel and Flounder were all looking at the fork together. They were all engaged. Now we're gonna look at these examples through the lens of SCN2A and see how ABA can support these skills, specifically with rote learning, positive reinforcement, and integrating other therapies. All right, so in this, no, stay there. Okay, so in this example, we have Flounder representing our kiddo with SCN2A. So while Ariel and Scuttle are both looking at the fork, Flounder is distracted. He's looking off into the other direction, probably because he cannot access the skills needed to demonstrate joint attention with the people or the things around him. Flounder in this case would really benefit from ABA therapy to motivate and reinforce his interests so he can participate with his friends. A lot of the time, this exact example is true for our kids who are moderately to severely impacted because they can't access those joint attention skills, right? Two people focus on one topic to be able to functionally participate. So while joint attention can be learned through other ways, in my opinion, the most effective way for our kids with SCN2A is through this rote learning approach with reinforcement. All right, next slide. Now we're gonna revisit our picture of Arthur, the sword and the stone. So Arthur, when we get there, next slide. No sliding, okay. So, okay, perfect. So now Arthur is representing our kiddo with SCN2A. In that previous photo that you guys didn't see, he was able to reach out and grab the sword. In this example, he is very frustrated, right? Look at his face. And that's because he doesn't have the motor planning skills to be able to follow through with what his brain wants his body to do. In this case, we would have to teach Arthur systematically how to reach out and grab that sword and follow through with his motor plan. For Arthur, this is probably going to look like hand over hand support, reaching out and touching the sword maybe 100 times until he can do that totally independently on his own. Once he's able to reach out and grab the sword, we would then probably talk to a PT or OT to make sure that he has the the coordination and motor strength to be able to grab the sword and then pull it out of the stone. So this process, if you are following along with me, is very, very tedious and probably going to be very boring for Arthur. So that is why ABA uses reinforcement, right? We have to get him to be motivated in the task that we are wanting him to do. In this case, we all know Arthur's going to become the King of England when he pulls the sword out of the stone. So he's probably going to have some natural motivation to participate in this task. Keep going, next slide. So there's a few more skill areas that I think our kids with SCN2A are going to benefit from. And these are only examples. So if they don't particularly relate to your kids, my hope is that at least they give parents some context to think about. So the next skill areas are play, communication, and stamina. Next slide. So in order to dive deeper into these particular skills, I want to introduce everyone to Caroline. Caroline is my little kiddo with SCN2A. I think one of the best ways to show how impactful ABA can be for kids with SCN2A is to show this real life example. So when Caroline and I first began therapy, every single skill we worked on had an underlying focus of joint attention and motor skills. We also exclusively used rote learning strategies, so that systematic, repetitive approach and tons of reinforcement to grow Caroline's skills. Next slide. So for Caroline, reinforcement looked like veggie sticks. If you guys don't know what veggie sticks are, music on the iPad, and hand massages. Caroline and I have probably gone through like 500 bags of veggie sticks over the past 3 years. Oh, good. I got you guys to laugh. So many bags of veggie sticks. And even though it is very comical, it really shows how important and necessary reinforcement can be when our kids with SCN2A are learning new skills. We also spent a lot of time resourcing out the expertise of a PT, OT, and speech therapist to make sure that Caroline had the most comprehensive program possible. We'll go to the next slide. So the first skill that we're going to talk about is play skills. Play skills are one of the areas that Caroline has made a huge amount of progress in. We started with a really, really simple toy like this one 3 years ago and systematically worked through it to build her joint attention and motor skills. So I would sprinkle veggie sticks all over the table and on top of the toy to get her to be motivated in participating with me. So those joint attention skills, me and Caroline and the task, and we are doing it together. And then followed through with our rote learning of taking her hand, picking up the ball, and then putting the ball into the hole. After about 3 or so weeks of working on this particular toy for like 5 to 10 hours a week, she was able to pick up the ball and put it in the hole independently. So then we had step 2 of presenting the toy with the door closed and the ball in the hole. And I would just put veggie sticks into the hole of the toy. But she was able to build off those initial motor skills and just open the door and then get all the veggie sticks out and eventually the ball. On the next slide. So then we moved on to a slightly more advanced toy that required her to actually lift up her arm and drop the ball, down the ramp. This particular toy also has a different door style on every side of the toy. But she was able to build off all of those skills and work on this toy in less than a week. So that's a pretty significant improvement. We can go to the next slide. There you go. So since motor skills and joint attention skills grow exponentially, especially when paired with a reinforcer like veggie sticks, Caroline and I now play with a whole bunch of different toys. So that includes building blocks. Next slide. She does a lot of beading and threading work all independently. Next slide. We play with Mr. Potato Head. She loves when the potato has its full face because then it's so cute smiling at her. Okay, next slide. And we do a lot of shape sorting and color sorting games like this one. You can see that is a bag of Chex Mix in the corner. So it's not as reinforcing as veggie sticks, but we always have something available for her to snack on. Just stay there for a second. So using ABA therapy to develop Caroline's play skills was really, really effective. And now she has a functional way to play and engage with myself, with her siblings, and with her family. Okay, so the next skill we're going to talk about is communication. Caroline has a lot of very, very effective communication skills, but no words. So the very first thing I taught Caroline via a very repetitive, systematic approach was to put her hand up for a really gentle high five when someone greeted her. So because Caroline cannot access her joint attention skills, her ability to make eye contact is limited, and she doesn't have any other means of communication. So when someone came up and greeted her, she would just kind of stand there. And then when the interaction was over, Caroline would walk away. So now, as you can see, she has a really meaningful way to connect with someone greeting her that makes Caroline and the other person both feel like they were part of the same exchange. Keep going. Perfect. So the second addition to Caroline's communication skills that we worked on was introducing a picture communication system via an iPad. This is what Caroline's iPad looked like when we first started. It had that one little veggie stick button, that was probably a little bit bigger than it is right now. But me and her speech therapist probably spent 2 to 3 months working on Caroline's joint attention and motor skills to try to get her to press that button independently. So we can't force kids to talk, and we don't want to do hand over hand. So we just had to try to get her to do that. So joint attention skills, me, Caroline, the speech therapist, all working together to get her to be interested in this iPad. And then the motor skills of actually being able to have her think about touching the button and then physically being able to do it. So fast forward to today. Sorry, next slide. Perfect. This is an example of what Caroline's iPad looks like in her food folder today. So she has a bunch of different foods that she can comment on and request, and it really has expanded her vocabulary. Next slide. Another thing that Caroline is really reinforced by are the people in her life. So we took photos of everyone that she's most often around, and now she's really reinforced to comment on the people that she sees or say hello to them. It's really been incredible watching Caroline's communication skills develop, and I really don't think that it could have happened without using ABA reinforcement and this rote learning approach. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Okay, the last example that I want to share about Caroline's communication is oh, sorry. I kind of, that's okay. All right, was that I printed off a bunch of words with pictures of her favorite things on it. I would stick them up on the wall just with Velcro. So now when Caroline wants to request that she's thirsty or say that she's hungry, she'll just walk up to the wall and pull a piece of paper off the wall. If someone's in the room, she will hand that piece of paper to that person in the room. And if no one's in the room, then she'll probably just drop it on the floor, but then somebody will pick it up and realize what she was commenting on. Okay, now we'll move on to our last skill. It's one of my favorite pictures. Caroline is under here. So the last example I want to share is how ABA can help our kids with building stamina for learning. So Caroline had this blanket on her lap during our lesson. And at some point, she just took the blanket off her lap and put it over her head and then sat there for like 10 seconds, which is why I was able to take this photo. Probably to communicate that she was all done with learning whatever we were learning that day. So when Caroline and I started, she was only able to participate for about 5 to 10 minutes at a time. So again, taking baby steps, slowly increasing the duration of our lessons, like 35 bags of veggie sticks later, she now can participate for like 20 to 30 minutes at a time on average. On this day, she probably tuckered out way before that timeline, but on average, she's made a lot of progress in that skill area. Next slide. So ABA therapy has been a game changer for Caroline's ability to develop the necessary skills to functionally and appropriately participate in her environment. It was and continues to be a very slow, systematic process requiring a lot of veggie sticks, but progress is happening. Yes, we're almost at my end of my time for today. So I just want to say that most of the time, by building joint attention and motor skills in a slow, systematic, repetitive way that includes reinforcing whatever skill the child is working on, even kids with moderate to severe needs, like kids with SCN2A, can develop the long-term skills needed to functionally and appropriately participate in their environment. I hope I met my goal of providing a little insight into what ABA is and how skill building can look like for a child with SCN2A. So thank you so much.
How are we doing after the break? Good. I'm supposed to say next slide with gusto. So if I do that, then oh, he was ahead of me already. You can go ahead. That's fine. Next slide. So hi, my name is Casey Seitz. I am here to talk to you about a really important topic, one that I have some personal experience with and why I started my practice in Kansas City about 10 years ago. I am a certified financial planner and also specialize in helping families who have a long-term dependent. AKA those with disabilities. So anybody interested in learning about money and how to keep it and protect it for our kids? Okay, good. Oh, look at this. People are going to be jealous. It worked. Like pause, right? Yay. Okay. Gosh, I feel special. I'm the first to get it to work. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about some statistics. Raise your hand if any of these resonate with you. 82% of us as caregivers are concerned we do not have enough financial resources to last their child's lifetime. It was me for sure. 77% of us are concerned we will not be able to retire. 70% of us believe we will have to compromise our own retirement plans in order to provide for our child long-term. Okay. 60% of caregivers with life insurance have less than 300,000 of coverage, and fewer than that have half or have the protection of whole life coverage or permanent life insurance. However, the lifetime cost of caring for a dependent with autism, for example, is between $1.4 and $2.4 million. And yes, that is out of pocket. 73% of caregivers do not have a long-term care plan. I don't even care if you have insurance. There's just no plan around that. And almost 90% of us are concerned about what will happen to our child when we are no longer here. I'm going to pause because that was my really emotional moment with my kids. And I'm going to tell you about my family in a second. Are you worried about that? Like, who replaces us, right? 59% have not written a will. 67% of parents have not set up a special needs trust. So we're going to talk about what that is, how it works today. And only 23% of families have a formal financial plan for their child, with about 37% working with an advisor. Okay, these are big, important statistics. And the whole reason I was invited here is because I made a commitment a long time ago to hopefully reduce these statistics and provide education to families, to disability advocates, to people who we will work with over our lifetime. So this is my family. It's my husband, Dan. This was at 4th of July in Wamego, Kansas. I don't know if any of you have ever been there. My parents live there, and they have like a $400,000 fireworks show. So they had these t-shirts that they say Boom Town, and it really was. It was amazing. Anyway, these are our two kids. Hudson is 11. She'll be 12 in October. She had a brain injury at birth due to a placental abruption that happened at the last minute during a very healthy pregnancy and labor. And so a lot of the things that you guys deal with your kids, we also deal with. We have CP, cortical visual impairment, which we just heard about, ongoing epilepsy. She has Lennox-Gastaut syndrome, and then G-tube, nonverbal, non-mobile. But I don't like describing her that way. That's how we get services. That's how we get our supports. Hudson is in there. She communicates using different devices, and we know that she loves purple. For those of you from the Kansas area, K-State Wildcats are near us. Woohoo. I think that's why she likes purple. That's, again, where my parents live. She is a big fan of Latin music. I don't know why or where that came from, but I mean, I don't blame her. Enrique is very attractive and good singer. And of course, she loves anything that sparkles. So we're really into Disney princesses and, that kind of thing. Our son, Dominic, that is Czech for Adam, for those of you who don't know. He will be 10 in December, and he is on the spectrum and has moderate ADHD. So we have two kiddos with needs. We see like 15 specialists at Children's Mercy hospitals and clinics in Kansas City. We're busy. And for that reason, my husband is a stay-at-home dad, but he also does some other things, which I'll share. So Dominic is awesome. He loves Roblox, Formula One racing. Red Bull is his team. And he's very into computer programming. So this is a kiddo who I just need to get him to adulthood. He'll be a great adult. Okay. Oh, my husband also runs a YouTube channel for anybody who watches that. It's about our family. It's very family friendly. We talk a lot about things like home modification, how we do different things, raising two kids with disabilities. So check that out if you'd like. This is my team. My sister, I'm blessed to work with, who's there on the left. And then we also work with another mom who has a kiddo on the spectrum. Her name And anywhere, okay? Because to qualify for certain benefits, state, local, and federal, things like Medicaid, SSI, as they become adults, income and asset tests will apply. Next slide, please. So what we're gonna do is we wanna talk to you about building your team. Who do you need on your team? Ideally, a financial professional who's really good and has a lot of depth in this type of planning. Certainly you could talk to me later if you want, but I work with a lot of other advisors across the country as well. A government benefits specialist and an estate planning attorney. Those three are really, really key to building your team. Next slide. So what do these people do? The attorney is going to develop documents. Okay. How many of you know what happens to your kids if you do not have an estate plan? Where they go? If you die, where do they go? Who decides? The state in which you live in decides. A court, a judge decides, not you, not family. So what happens in the meantime while we're waiting on a court date? Where do your kids go? Foster care. How many of you want your kids in foster care while that's happening? I love the foster care system. I respect it. That's not where I want my daughter or my son. If you do not have a will, a special needs trust, or anything documented legally in your county, please use this as motivation to get that done. Okay, so I can help you find an estate planning attorney that will help you do this. It can be affordable. It's usually a one-time only fee. And then you have some peace of mind and you know exactly where your kids are going to go. Financial person. Okay, this is the professional who's going to work with you on identifying and making sure you have the right type and the right amount of all the different types of insurance, life insurance, long-term disability, long-term care planning. They should also be helping you develop your own investment and retirement plan. And then for our kids, we might start looking at ABLE accounts as a way to save for them. Last but not least, they're going to also work with the estate planning attorney to talk to you about what goes into the trust. How much does the special needs trust really require? Who is spent, how are we spending it down? Who is the trustee for that special needs trust? And then last but not least, a very important key member to this team is the government benefits specialist. Okay, we'll talk a little bit about who that is in each of your states if you're curious. But really what they're going to do is help you maximize and identify all of the state, local, and federal programs that your child is eligible for and when. Next slide. They're also going to talk to you though about how to develop a cost of care plan. Okay, so where do you live? What do you do for your child? And how much is it going to cost if you're not here to provide those services any longer? So when we get old, right, when I'm in my 80s, I don't think I'll be lifting Hudson by myself anymore, right? Who's helping me do that? And they're probably not going to do it for free. Okay, next slide. So again, we're going to start looking at benefits. What will benefits pay for? Social Security has 3 different accounts. Social Security supplemental income, SSDI, which is disability income, and then retirement income. And all 3 work very differently, and you apply for all 3 very differently. Medicaid, how many of you are on a waiver? How many of you know what a waiver is or don't know what a waiver is? Okay, we'll talk. Those are important. Vocational services. What about employment? You know, in the beginning, I thought maybe Hudson won't be able to work at all. Now I'm learning she has some pretty unique skills in making art. She uses like these computer devices and she makes this beautiful art. In fact, the cover of my book this fall is going to be one of her pieces of art. So I can put that on Etsy. She could earn income, right? So I challenge you to really expand and get creative about what does employment look like for your child, even if they have a lot of disabilities. Certainly public school services. And then if you have military service in the family, sometimes the VA can be very helpful in getting us some supports as well. Next slide. Actually, go 2 slides. Okay, how many of your children here today, and I'm sorry on Zoom, I can't see you guys, but how many of your children today are receiving Social Security benefits? Okay, and of you that raised your hand, do you have adult children? Okay, so how SSI works, for those of you who aren't on this yet, is when your child is a minor, when they are under 18, our income as parents or caregivers and our assets, plus how many people live in the house, are what counts to qualify for SSI. So I think it's a sliding scale, but the last time I looked, it was $47,000 or more in a household of 4, and your child would not qualify. Okay, so that's not very much. However, once your child turns 18, that changes. Now your child, now an adult, is the one who is looked at for that same asset test. This is why we can't have money in their name. Okay, the 2022 amount, the maximum amount is $841 a month. By the way, that was the largest COLA increase Social Security has seen in like over a decade. It was like a 5.6 increase. But how many of you could live on $841 a month to pay for housing, utilities, and food? Not many places probably can do that. So it's not the only thing, but we certainly want to maximize it if we can. Next slide. When you retire, it matters when you take Social Security, and it matters at what age, because that will then affect what's called a child bump up or the disabled child benefit. In other words, if your child was considered disabled before the age of 22, you go to elect Social Security retirement, whether it's 62, 65, 66, 67, depending on your age, or the latest is 70. The bump up can be up to 50% of your benefit that will then become your child's SSI, which now is SSDI benefit. Isn't this fun? There's so many acronyms and nuances. They make it so easy to understand government benefits. But it matters because that you can't change it. And so that 50% bump up, by the way, does not affect your retirement amount. And that benefit will stay with your child for the rest of their life. It's like their pension. Also SSDI, after 2 years on SSDI, your child will qualify for Medicare. And if you're on a waiver, Medicaid will pay the Medicare premiums. Now we have provided health insurance for our child for their lifetime without your primary insurance. Okay, so really, really important stuff here. This is why the government benefit specialist is so important. Thank you. I have 2 minutes. Let's skip a couple slides. You guys will have these, by the way. I also do these recorded and they're much longer and more detailed. So if you'd like more information, let me know. Okay, special needs trust. Anything we put into a special needs trust will not count against your child for access to benefits now or in the future. Once we create this, and again, this is the attorney that helps you create this, we have to then figure out how much goes into it and what goes into it when you pass away, or if it should be funded now. Next slide. I also have a big point I want to make in that I would highly encourage you to research or learn about who should be the trustee for these trusts. I have a lot of families I work with who have active money inside of special needs trusts, and they have assigned a family member to be the trustee. This is a full-time job. It requires a lot of back and forth sometimes with Medicaid and Social Security, who ask questions about distributions all the time. You have to know investment planning inside of the trust. You have to be able to file taxes on the trust. And oh, by the way, if you do something wrong, you can be held liable. You can be sued for that. So I prefer, and I recommend a lot, that families consider what's called a corporate trustee. So this is usually either an attorney, a trust company, or a bank that knows what they're doing, that can help whoever is your caregiver or whoever is left behind to take care of your child to manage this aspect of their life. Right? I don't file my own taxes. I have a CPA for that. I don't create my own legal documents. I have an attorney for that. Same thing on this. I would highly recommend a corporate trustee. Okay, letter of intent. Next slide, please. How many of you have created a letter of intent? Do you know what this is? You can click a couple of times, by the way, AB people. Thank you. This is, if you want this, by the way, I have a PDF of this I can email to everybody. And I have like a little sign up sheet to get your emails if you want. But this is like the last set of instructions that you would leave to whoever you're leaving your kids to. It's not just doctors and medications, it's also their quality of life stuff. Like Hudson loves fireworks because of her CVI, but don't take her to a fireworks display because it'll cause seizures. It's too loud, it's too sensory. So let her watch it on TV, right? Where is that information? It's not going to be in her care plan with her waiver. It's not necessarily going to be at her school. And we don't technically write it down. It's just all here, right? So creating the letter of intent is going to help provide that smooth transition of care to the next people in line for whoever is caring for her. And I know then that at least they have a baseline for what to do next. So this is a really good thing. It has scheduling. You can update this every year. I actually use this as my master document in all of our IEP meetings, our care coordination meetings. When we leave on vacation, this is left behind as well. So it's a really good thing. I'm going to joke, but I wish this came with her when she was born. Like, could someone have done this for me? Right. So think that way too. Okay. One more slide. And then I'm going to step down because yeah, she's yelling at me. This green thing. Okay. ABLE accounts. How many of you live in a state that has an ABLE account or that you're aware of? Okay. Achieving a Better Life Experience came about in 2014 and all the states started enacting them 2015, 2016. There are a few states that do not offer ABLE accounts. However, federal regs allow you to open any state's ABLE plan. So if you're in one of those states, it's fine. But if you had a child diagnosed before age 26, which I think we all have in this room, then they can have an ABLE account. Anybody can contribute to these, parents, family, friends, neighbors, whoever. Some states offer state income tax deductions for putting money in. The money grows tax-free. You have a maximum amount per year of $16,000 that you can contribute. And if your child is on SSI, we can't allow the balance to go over $100,000 total. These are very helpful. I call them operating accounts. Tax-free growth, special needs trust, not tax-free. So I like taking money from the special needs trust and putting it in the ABLE, and now that is the money we use. Why? Because I don't have to give the IRS as much money. Okay, so certain strategies on that. If you guys are curious, write this down. ablenrc.org is the website for this. And I have to go now, but I'm happy to answer questions. There's like 5 more slides. It's fine.